Good evening and welcome to TEDx St. Francis 2025. My name is Jody Min. I'm the Director of Holy Cross Mission and Ministry, and we are going to begin our evening as we do all things at St. Francis with a short prayer of blessing. Let us remember that we are in the holy presence of God, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Loving and provident God, as we gather today for this TEDx event, we pause to acknowledge your presence among us. We come together as a Holy Cross community, inspired by the charism of our founders, to educate both the mind and the heart, to seek knowledge not for its own sake, but for the transformation of the world. Bless this gathering, Lord. May it be a space where ideas challenge and inspire, where voices are heard with respect, and where dialogue leads to deeper understanding. Fill our speakers with clarity, confidence, and courage to share their insights and open our hearts to receive their words with discernment and grace. Guided by the example of Blessed Basil Moreau, may we embrace the mission to be people of hope, to cross boundaries in pursuit of truth, and to build a world where knowledge serves justice, compassion, and the dignity of all. May this event reflect our Holy Cross commitment to forming scholars, citizens, and disciples who act with zeal to make the world a better place. We make this prayer in the name of Jesus our brother. Amen. Blessed Basil Moreau, pray for us. Saint Andre Bessette, pray for us. Ave Crux, Spes Unica. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. I'd now like to invite to the stage Miss Leslie Shortle.
Good evening, and a second welcome to TEDx St. Francis. This is my 8th year moderating TEDx and its predecessor, SF Talks, but this is my first time doing the welcome. You know why? This is terrifying. Not only have our speakers written original talks and memorized them, but they have also figured out how to deliver in an engaging way, speaking with inflection, inserting pregnant pauses, figuring out what to do with their hands, and how to move meaningfully and not awkwardly around this tiny red carpet. But they've done it, and I'm so proud of their work. I've spent over half of my life at St. Francis, first as a student and now as an educator. I never did anything like this as a student. And when I returned as an educator, I was determined to put all of my extracurricular support into athletics, which I did until this program fell into my lap, thanks to one very eager and compelling freshman, Aishani Athresh, and the support of our former principal, Mrs. Patty Tennant. I'm so grateful it did, because this is the best thing that I have ever experienced at this school. What you're going to see tonight is the power of student voice and leadership. Our speakers have written their own talks, coached by their peers. The hospitality out in the lobby and in the alumni event prior was designed by our hospitality team. Our students have created all of the graphics and artwork and materials that you will see for tonight. And our publicity team has handled all of the press, which is really critical because I don't even have Instagram. And our students running sound and lights know that I freak out about everything, and they've assured me that tonight will go smoothly, and I know it will. What I do is I book rooms and I provide light snacks. So, I am very grateful to our speakers and the board that supports them for the bravery of getting onto this stage and sharing their unique ideas. I find hope in their words. And when I reflect upon what you will hear tonight and what I have heard in the last 7 years of doing this event is values. You're going to hear our students talk about the values of connection, democracy, inclusion, of empathy, and of listening deeply. I hope that you will listen keenly to them tonight. I hope you will applaud them for the bravery of doing this thing that is terrifying me right now. And I hope that you will also find hope in their words, for they are our future. So, I think I made it. That was like 1 minute. They're going to do that times 10. I'm going to hand this over now to the true leaders tonight. I'd like to introduce to you two of our co-directors who oversee everything that you will see here tonight, seniors Riley Clark and Anna Fazioli.
Welcome to the 2025 TEDx St. Francis High School event. And thank you, Ms. Jody and Mrs. Shortle, for leading us in our opening prayer. My name is Anna Fazioli, and I'm joined tonight by my fellow seniors and co-directors, Riley Clark and Arav Santake. We are thrilled to share with you the culmination of 6 months of hard work. From speaker workshops to lobby decorating to late night tech rehearsals, we've cherished this opportunity to guide our speakers through this unique process. We have 8 unique ideas and stories to share with you all tonight, and we are proud to present the raw authenticity of our generation, asking the question, what is your story, but more importantly, what can the world learn from you? Our organization was founded 7 years ago by Aishania Tresh as SF Talks, and we are proud to continue this legacy, now being TEDx certified for 5 years.
Yes, that XUC means that we are officially licensed and independently organized part of the TED organization. We are extremely proud to be able to combine the missions of both TED and St. Francis High School as we inspire transformative leadership and innovative ideas to create a brighter future. Key to our mission here at TEDx St. Francis High School is our entirely student-composed board. Everything you see tonight is a product of the time and effort our students had dedicated towards making tonight's event special, along with the tireless commitment of our wonderful moderator, Ms. Leslie Shortle. Tonight, you have the opportunity to experience something truly unique, something you cannot find anywhere else, as a group of driven students inspired to make an impact with their voice take to the stage. Thus, we invite you to embrace a new idea, understand a new perspective, and find place in each of your hearts for each of the student speakers that will take to the stage tonight. The piece of art you see behind me is the official TEDx St. Francis High School artwork created by our own board member, Sydney Chua. It includes elements of every idea, perspective, and story that you will hear in this room tonight, making it the most authentic representation of our special event. I would now like to invite to the stage our wonderful Chief of Staff, Ms. Tenley Flahaven, who will give some final reminders before we get started with tonight's event. Thank you.
Thank you so much for attending our TEDx event. As I welcome you to the wonderful Performing Arts Theater, here are a few reminders. Our hospitality team has worked very hard to prepare the baked goods and light refreshments. Please enjoy them in the lobby or outside. Next, I want to familiarize you with the exits. The main exit, which connects to the lobby, is to your right. We also have 2 exits behind you and to your left. We have professional photographers and videographers, so please silence your cell phones and tuck them away for the duration of the event. Tonight's event is structured into 2 blocks with 4 speakers each. We will have an intermission in between the 2 blocks, allowing a moment of space to start processing these wonderful ideas, write notes to our speakers, and enjoy a cookie or 2. Please refer to your program for more information. Our speakers have worked very hard to present their ideas. We ask that you stay inside the theater for the duration of each talk. Without further ado, let's introduce our very first speaker of the evening.
Our first speaker of the night is here to challenge the way we think about the college application process. When most people hear college applications, they think of stress, competition, and sleepless nights. But he has a different perspective and wants to share an appreciation for college apps. Audience, please welcome to the stage self-growth enthusiast and a friend of mine, Shaurya Gulani. Okay, wait. No, this is not what it looks like, I swear. I've noticed that most of you by now have read the words college applications in the title of this talk. You may be debating if it's too late to quietly sneak out, or maybe some of you got that gentle nudge from your parents to sit up straight and pay attention. Well, don't worry. This is not a PowerPoint on the one extracurricular you need to get into your dream school. Nor am I the adult who already went to a top-tier university and now has a hindsight bias to insist that you shouldn't worry about college admissions because no one cares about where you went to college in the real world. Nor am I the senior who didn't get into a top-tier university and is now going to compensate by absolutely bashing the admissions process as a whole. I am a junior in high school, and with the small window of time I have where I can be free of the biases previously mentioned, for once, I want to shift our focus away from what to do for or make of college admissions and talk about the process of preparing itself. Within the high school storm of AP courses and SATs, the years that others warned me would be one of the most stressful periods of my life, I've actually found myself enjoying my time more than ever. I'll just go ahead and say it. I am falling in love with the college application process. Okay, I see someone holding a sign saying blink twice if you need help. No, I really feel this way. I know it may sound strange, so let me elaborate. I remember as an 8th grader the stressful time in my house when my older brother was working on his college essays. Naturally, I started to wonder how I would answer those essay prompts about significant moments I had in life or how I have impacted my community. So early on, I pondered on those typical essay subjects like sports injuries I had endured or family health complications, and I would try to retrospectively analyze how those events have played into who I am today. Or perhaps how I should let them play into the person I aspire to become. I marveled at how these essay prompts can allow us to build wisdom and maturity. But it didn't end there. Thanks to the new wave of college counselors on social media platforms that took over my For You page, I came across these viral stories about successful college essays that didn't revolve around dramatic life events, but rather the most ordinary. Take Costco samples and how they can represent one's intellectual curiosity to try new things. Or using your laptop collage of stickers to explain different parts of your identity. So I started analyzing every moment of my life as I lived it, in hopes of not missing out on my ordinary thing. Like the times I would visit a Hindu temple and pay attention to the practice of removing shoes before entering sacred spaces. I realized that I could tie this to my interest in sports engineering. Just by analyzing all the different sneakers in the shoe cubbies, I could keep up with the trends of the shoes people wore, and take note of the shoes I hadn't seen before, to research all their tech features when I got back home. Now, was this excessive? Sure. A bit superficial? Maybe. But constantly trying to turn every moment into a clever, witty hook allowed me to look for, develop, and engage with my passions in times or spaces where I would have never otherwise done. And with repetitively engaging in deep thinking of trying to fit the big, small, great, and especially not so great events in my life into a larger story, the self-discovery and maturity I gained was phenomenal. The essay section was the first demonstration to me that the components of the college application process simply provide high school students with a blueprint for self-growth. These essays do more than assess who you are. They push you to grow. They can transform a victim narrative of tragic loss into one of empowerment and passionate aspirations, or a once bred insecurity into a journey of progress and self-love. When it came to the community service section, the intrinsic merit was just as consistent. I avoided the program suggested to me for easy hours where you would just clock in, go with the motions, and clock out. I found an organization of interest myself and started volunteering frequently, often staying beyond my hours to talk with the administrative faculty and learn about the actual social injustices that their operations aim to address. So with each summer I returned, I picked up more responsibilities in new departments
and eventually got the opportunity to carry out my own initiative of opening their sports camps to kids with intellectual differences. With all the managerial skills and injustice awareness I grew, I was proud of the growth I achieved. All I could think about was how I could have very easily missed out. How if we treat things like extracurriculars or community service as a requirement to graduate or a bullet point on our resume, they become things to acquire instead of avenues to pursue. These standards or requirements can quickly turn into limits on our potential. The garden we build of skills and insights will never thrive if every time a flower blooms, we cut it, just to go show someone else that we are, in fact, a gardener. From there on, I caught myself saying a powerful statement in my head whenever I tried to do something for my resume. Even if college applications weren't a thing, I would still do blank. Even if there were no applications and you didn't need a letter of recommendation, you probably shouldn't be someone that your teachers despise anyways. Because it's inherently rewarding to try building a relationship with them. Or even with grades, I started to see how it's less about the grades assigned to us and more about building the work ethic and drive to take on challenges presented to you as a teenager. It's common to hear students in math classes ask, when am I ever going to use this again in real life? And sure, you may never see that math problem ever again. But you will come across other problems in life where the methods, tools, and tactics you developed will become immensely valuable. Think about this. The mind that could develop something as complex as calculus was the same mind who could use those critical thinking skills to look at an apple and develop theories about orbital motion. For those of you who don't know, this mind belonged to Isaac Newton. Now, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and imagine 438 circles, with each circle signifying 80 hours. Okay, I'm kidding, don't worry, I made a visual for all of you. This is how much time we have between 14 and 18 years of age. Now, most of you are probably looking at the empty circles, thinking about how little time you have. Mainly because we've been trained to see school as a necessary evil, not an opportunity. It's common in our society to hear the phrase, it's either 4 years of suffering for 50 years of freedom, or 4 years of freedom for 50 years of suffering. But why do we accept this narrative in the first place? What exactly is the sacrifice? I mean, we get 58 whole circles, 4,640 hours dedicated to spending time in a learning environment built to challenge and shape us. And with this, can it not be as simple to say that we spend so much time in school, 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock for 720 days, that we just might as well try to get good at it? Because really, what's the alternative to not setting goals and working towards them in our adolescence? Is it a sacrifice to take that harder AP class at the risk of a lower grade? Or would the real sacrifice be staying safe and never truly applying yourself? I think we've all heard that one butterfly quote when it comes to chasing our goals. If you want to catch a butterfly, don't chase it because it will run away. Instead, build a garden to attract the butterfly. But what I'm trying to add here today is that even if you don't catch that butterfly, you still have your garden. The first mistake we're already making is by accepting how it's called the butterfly quote rather than the garden quote. And that mistake is the root of all the anxiety we face in high school as we go about the application process. If we understood that the garden we built, your self-growth, was the real goal, anxieties like academic validation or competition would fade away. I mean, we all have that one friend, right, that's doing 1,000 extracurriculars, gets good grades, and still has time to do those things that our parents don't know about when comparing us both. But we shouldn't feel any pressure to catch up or one-up them, because we understand that the work we're putting in is not going to go against someone else, but rather define yourself as a human being. And look, I get it. Those lingering thoughts of working so hard in high school just to get rejected from your dream colleges are stressful. And those thoughts are going to continue to surface throughout our lives. What if after all that hard work, you lose that competition? That relationship ends, or that startup you created fails? But why not apply ourselves regardless of the success that we will have with admissions? Work to become the best version of yourself, and just like college acceptances or any other external sources of validation in life, to be a pro or side effect of simply being that best self. Not everything is an exact science to your self-worth. That bad hair day that your crush saw you with, the tryout where you kept cramping, or that college rejection you received because of geographical representation. You're not left with nothing when rejected. Those setbacks don't cancel out all the late nights, the work ethic you developed, skills you learned, or insights that you gained along the way. If you don't catch that butterfly, you still have your garden. Rejection only leaves you with nothing if you chased the butterfly. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharia, for that wonderful insight in the college application process and discovering your passions along the journey. Similarly, our next speaker will also be talking about self-discovery, but more specifically about religion and faith. Please welcome to the stage, Rihanna Goel.
Traffic. Mom's fifth rant that day about Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt breaking up. Swallowing gum, and especially when Mom hears Dad say he's going to do it later. These were all things I just knew were bad as a kid. But why? I never fully understood. I swore I'd never cry over a celebrity breakup, until Taylor Swift and Joe Alwyn proved me wrong. Then, one day, I swallowed a piece of gum and prepared myself for the 7-year stomach sentence. But nothing happened. And I vowed to never make the same mistakes as Dad, falling subject to Mom's angry glares and mutters under the breath all day. Until I grew later, and suddenly, Dad and I were exchanging panicked looks as we told Mom together, "We'll do it later." And just like that, I started to realize that not everything I grew up believing was as bad as I thought, including perhaps the most forbidden thing of all in our God-loving, religion-centered household: atheism. That realization unfolded slowly, a thread loosening in the fabric of what I'd been taught. For most of my life, religion wasn't a choice. It was a given, like habits I'd inherited from my parents. My mom's shopping habit, for one, turning our house into a revolving door of Amazon deliveries. She'd sift through, returning most, of course, because boxes let you choose what fits. For me, though, religion arrived with no return label. Mine was Hinduism, delivered at birth. My earliest memories were shaped by rituals. Our family prayer room pulsed every night with glowing oil lamps and chants rising to gods with the belief that someone somewhere was listening. I grew up cradled in that sound, leaning deeply on that hum. And for the longest time, I never questioned it, until one day I did. At 12 years old, I was standing in our temple, staring at the gods carved into stone, when a quiet,
unfamiliar thought entered my mind. What if this isn't real? The thought alone felt like a betrayal. But the moment it arrived, it refused to leave. I tried to push it away, tried to reason with myself. Of course God was real. Of course someone was listening. Right? I wasn't so sure. So when the uncertainty didn't fade, I did what any kid does with a secret. I hid it, nodding Hindu when asked, easing away from rituals when no one noticed. But then the pandemic hit, and suddenly faith, or at least the need for it, was everywhere. My brother and I started Apart But Not Alone, a mindfulness initiative that elevated to a global platform, reaching over 3,200 participants across 24 countries. Our workshops were rooted in Buddhist teachings, equanimity, compassion, the acceptance of suffering, and it led us to be under the training of the monks at the Dalai Lama Monastery in Dharamshala, India. I arrived at the monastery as an oddball atheist, grappling to fit the pieces. I was born into Hinduism, training under Buddhism, studying at a Catholic school, yet still an atheist. Who was I? In our first session, a monk asked me, "What anchors you?" We discussed suffering not as a divine wrath, but as a shared human struggle. The monk said to me, "Suffering is universal, and attachment causes suffering. The greatest attachment humans have is to their identity." And that hit me, because for the longest time, I was so attached to the idea that I had to be either religious or atheist that I never considered that there could be another way. For the first time, religion didn't feel like something I had to accept or reject. It was something I could borrow from without needing to belong to it. When I returned back to my Catholic school, the prayers I had once ignored started to catch my attention. Not as religion, but instead as forms of self-reflection, growth, and hope, open to anyone, religious or not. That's when I came to understand faith neutrality. Not an affirmation to religion, but not a complete dismissal of it either. Instead, the freedom to move between them, choosing what fits. The idea that you can stand in a temple, a church, a monastery, not as a visitor, but instead as a participant of the shared human experience. That faith can be fluid, evolving, and mine to define. Yet I still hadn't said it out loud. One day, I was in a car ride back from school with my mom as she sang along to religious songs, when suddenly I blurted out, "I don't believe in God." I expected the car's roof to cave or the brakes to slam. But instead, she gently squeezed my hand and said, "That's your choice, your way. Honor ours, but feel free to walk yours." No thunder, no shame. I'd been bracing for a battle that she didn't fight, and that made me question, was it ever a battle in the first place? Her quiet grace shifted me. Religion wasn't a lock I had to break, it was a door I could open. And with that, I began to walk in a rooms of possibilities. I've moved through Hinduism's rhythm, Buddhism's pause, Catholicism's reach, and atheism's silence. Not to land, but to linger where they meet. Because faith is not about picking a side, it's knowing I never had to. Once I started to feel comfortable with my stance as an atheist, I in fact became closer to religion. Last summer, I attended a one-week Catholic youth retreat in South Lake Tahoe, mainly to have fun with my friends. But on the night of reconciliation, a shift occurred. As others stepped into confession, I stayed back, watching shadows move through silence. Tears fell around me, and voices broke open in ways I hadn't expected. In that stillness, I saw faith not as a religious belief, but as vulnerability, a thread running through us all, beyond names or creeds. That night carved a space in me, not to join, but to stand alongside, holding what stirred without claiming it. And that's where the true beauty of religion lies, in its power to unite us all. So often we think of faith as a religious concept, but at its core it is a universal language, one that transcends belief systems and instead speaks directly to the essence of what it means to be human. Faith isn't tied to God or a particular belief. Instead, it is the trust that we place in something greater than ourselves, something that connects us all. Whether that belief be in religion, in destiny, or simply in the idea that there is meaning amid life's chaos, faith can serve as a source of power and hope for everyone. And that's one of the most remarkable aspects about faith, that it speaks to us in different ways. For some, faith serves as a source of strength during times of crisis. For others, faith offers comfort and solace when we seek it, even in absurd situations. Just last week, my friend spent an hour sending relationship voice notes, seeking relationship advice. Not to a friend, not to a trusted person, but to her Snapchat AI. The AI, clearly over it, responded with, "I'm busy right now. Can we chat later?" Her, somehow pissing off AI, came to me for advice. And I, in a slightly nicer way, trying to get rid of her, said, "Just have some faith. Everything will work out." And while most of you in this room may lack the rare talent of provoking an AI to avoid you, or at least I hope so, I would still offer the same advice. Just have some faith. Because as an atheist immersed in religion, I have witnessed the transformative effects of faith firsthand. I've observed how religion, despite the fights and arguments of the day, brought our family together every evening to pray. In those moments, my faith in family was reinforced. I witnessed how religion was able to inspire monks to renounce worldly desires, deepening my faith in the pursuit of virtue. And I observed how religion was able to make people vulnerable and loving, which strengthened my faith in humanity. Time and time again, religion has renewed my faith in these ideals, which is why I have continued to engage with it, not because of adherence to any particular doctrine, but because I have been able to recognize religion's ability to connect us to faith and nourish us in the things that bring us together, the universal truths of life. In many ways, my journey with atheism mirrors an unresolvable breakup. Just like a persistent ex, religion found its way to keep me interested. But I didn't want to make a commitment to it again. Once I broke up with religion, I enjoyed the freedom of being able to explore different options without feeling tied to anything. For the longest time, atheism felt like a hard line. No faith, no belief in anything bigger. But over time, I've learned that atheism doesn't need to shut me out from finding a deeper sense of meaning. In fact, a recent study by the Pew Research Center shows that 23% of US atheists believe in a higher power. This statistic goes to reinforce the idea that belief is not a one-size-fits-all thing. Instead, as my mom said, religion is a choice, and everyone walks their own path with it. In many ways, my own journey with religion and atheism has given me a unique lens to observe the world. It's like a Buddhist saying I've come across. When a wise man points at the moon, the imbecile examines his finger. Religion, in this sense, is one of the many ways that we try to grasp the greater truths of life. But so often we get caught up in the rules, the rituals, the intricacies, the practices, that we forget what religion is actually trying to point us towards. We forget to ask ourselves, what's the real lesson here? And that's why faith is important, because it reminds us that the finger is nowhere near as important as what it points to. And there's no shame in searching for different ways to explore and access this message of faith, Whether that be religion, nature, meditation, or simply driving with the windows down, we all find our paths to connect with something bigger than ourselves. The key isn't in the label that we place in it, but instead in how we ground ourselves in love and trust. For it is through this nourishment of faith, this care for what we believe in, that we truly begin to love in ways that transcend everything else. And perhaps, in doing so, we may just find that what unites us is far greater than what divides us. Thank you.
Thank you, Rihanna, for sharing your experiences and your insights in the realm of religion and faith. Now, I'm honored to welcome you to our next speaker, or should I say, speakers. These two fine gentlemen have a shared experience in the role that curiosity has played in their lives. Now, please give a warm welcome to two of my close friends, Alex Glaros Stavropoulos and Adi Kenchamana.
Have you ever been around an annoying little kid who won't stop asking you, why? A younger sibling or cousin, or even that kid sitting next to you in your calc class?
We were those kids.
My mom had to remind me that she wasn't Google.
We did this because we were just trying to do what all kids do, which is to make sense of the world and our place within it, much to our parents' chagrin.
The truth is that these annoying questions are the basis of all learning. After all, endless inquiry has resulted in everything we've invented or discovered as a species. But then we got older.
Our questions that were once met with eye rolls and a begrudging explanation went ignored. We are expected to just know and are discouraged from pursuing our interests because they aren't productive.
We prioritize assignments and deadlines over awe and wonder. While one is certainly urgent in the moment, deprioritizing things that are useful in the long run is an insidious threat.
Now, if we continue to suppress curiosity and prioritize efficiency over exploration, we risk losing the very essence of what drives progress and innovation.
When I was 7 years old, I became completely obsessed with airplanes and flight. One summer morning, I woke up with the conviction that I would build myself an airplane. And not just that, but one I could ride in. Now, where would a 7-year-old get the materials needed to build something like this? The recycling bin. Naturally. I scavenged through old cardboard boxes until I found a few big enough to build myself a glider. When my original idea of jumping off the play structure at the park was shut down by my parents, I improvised and decided to run around in a field to try to take off that way. Long story short, I never left the ground. I could feel the cardboard trying to lift up as I ran, but somehow I never actually ran fast enough to take to the skies. In a result-oriented way of thinking, I failed. I did not accomplish my goal. But even though I failed, I learned something. I learned about what's possible and not possible in that context, and how impressive it actually is that humans have built real flying machines. My curiosity, even when it did not lead to success, showed me in no uncertain terms what I didn't know and what I need to rethink.
As a kid, I spent countless summer afternoons hunched over an old redwood bench in my garage. It was always strewn with the colorful guts of RC cars, random tools, and far, far too much duct tape. But to me, it was more than a bench. It was a laboratory, a playground, a world of endless possibilities. This all started when my parents wouldn't buy me the fancy RC cars that my friends had. So I was forced to use my friends' secondhand, often broken ones, that just ended up sitting on my shelf for months. One day, after rewatching Phineas and Ferb for the 100th time, I was finally inspired to open one up and poke around. Lo and behold, I find a loose wire by the motor, and after reattaching it with about half a roll of duct tape, the motor whirred back to life. To me, it felt like magic. That spark of discovery led me deeper, trying out different motors, carving different tread patterns in the tires, and even trying out higher voltage batteries. Eventually, the cars themselves mattered less than the thrill of discovering how things worked.
Now, to someone who's rigid or dogmatic, my little flying experiment might seem like a waste of time. I could have spent my Sunday doing something useful instead of chasing an impossible dream. That's not always the right perspective to take, though. Bruce Lee, the renowned martial artist, understood this. His style drew from a variety of disciplines, from classical Chinese Wing Chun to modern boxing and fencing. What emerged is what he called the way of no way. What does that even mean? Well, he rejected dogma or strict rules handed down by others. He believed that a method should be judged based on its effectiveness, not based on tradition. He said, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, and add what is uniquely your own. And that, to me, is the essence of curiosity. It's about constantly evaluating, adapting, and evolving based on what we learn. The hard part here is constantly. Often in my life, I'm pressured to do something a certain way because that's how it's always been done. I'm sure many of you have felt this too, and we cave in because who are we to disagree? What Bruce inspires us to do is to be audacious in this way and to ask the big questions. We should be unafraid to find links between seemingly unrelated things, links that purists would see and go, that's never going to work. To be curious is to try things out for yourself.
Now, in every RC car that I took apart, there was always this mysterious green square, the computer chip. For years, I avoided it, convinced that I wouldn't be able to understand it. But eventually, my curiosity won. I dug out an old soldering iron from my dad's toolbox and began experimenting. Now, my first attempts at hacking the chip were a complete bust, but I learned how to solder. Now, I was no longer reliant on clumsy wads of duct tape to join two wires, and instead, I could create connections that were sleek and secure. Looking back, I realized that this skill started with me asking a question that I never truly got the answer to, yet in chasing it, I gained something far more valuable.
Think about it. As children, we're all born with a natural curiosity about the world around us. We're constantly trying new things and asking why over and over again. But something happens as we get older. We stop seeking new information solely for the joy of doing it and start to rely on experience. Experience can help us navigate the world, but it can also limit us. Research from the University of Cardiff points to this. As we age, our brains seek out prediction errors. Essentially, we look for information that disrupts our current way of understanding. Anytime something we didn't anticipate happens, it is human nature to try and understand it. Eventually, we come to some conclusion and revise our mental model, one that is now ever so slightly more accurate. These errors get less frequent as we age. In one sense, that's good. We don't want to be 30 years old and still trying to figure out the fact that things fall to the ground when you throw them. But the downside is, we start to think we know enough. We become complacent, believing we have all the answers and we no longer need to challenge our assumptions. We stagnate, failing to see the many possibilities in our lives. Curiosity frees us from this mold. I'm a big puzzle guy. When I get stuck in Sudoku or cornered in chess, it can feel like the game grinds to a halt. Active curiosity is like erasing all your guesses and flipping the board. By ridding yourself of your current mental model, possibilities you couldn't have imagined show themselves clearly. Reframing really is a superpower when it comes to being actively curious in daily life.
And guess what? My curiosity and tinkering have led me to grow and develop new, invaluable skills that continue to serve me to this day. The hands-on experience with circuitry, well, it made the electricity unit in my physics class a breeze. The knife skills I picked up while woodworking, they made me more confident in the kitchen. And my ability to isolate a single broken component in a larger mess, my spidey sense, it never fails me, whether I'm fixing a pair of broken headphones or just double-checking a math problem. These are all skills that people often struggle to develop, yet I have stumbled upon them simply by following my curiosity. But today, we are so focused on stacking achievements, padding resumes, and being productive that we often forget to explore aimlessly.
By exploring, we learn about the world and our place in it, becoming better at decision-making, goal-setting, and all the other productive things we need to do. Sadly, as beneficial as it is, curiosity is becoming increasingly difficult to sustain in our modern world in large part because of how children are pushed to specialize from a young age, both in and out of the classroom.
I am certainly guilty of this. Earlier this year, my aunt asked me how I spent my time, and I realized that I had gotten so caught up in the college application frenzy that I too had forsaken the aimless exploration of my youth. I had abandoned that old redwood bench and my curiosity.
We often confuse urgency for importance. The most important thing is not always the deadline that screams at you, but the opportunity that calls you.
So we have made a commitment. I am going to spend less time chasing achievements.
And I'm going to spend more time being open to learning anytime, anywhere.
And we hope you'll join us on this journey.
Thank you, Alex Naughty, for your wonderful talk, for reminding us to find joy in the journey and that curiosity should be never endless. I'll try to remember that the next time a 4-year-old comes up to me and asks me why for the 1,000th time. Our next speaker will be talking about the history of colonization in Venezuela and the fragility of democracy. Please welcome to the stage Junior Marco Sucre.
I want you to close your eyes and imagine the life of a young boy. You're on your father's farm, down in the creek, fishing with your older siblings after a long day of work on the fields, when all of a sudden, a cloud of angry insects attacks. In a panic, you slip and fall all the way down in the creek with a splash. And of course, your older siblings are on the verge of tears laughing down at you. Great. The worst part is, you're the youngest and the smallest, so you can't do much about it, and end up going home sad and drenched while your siblings walk away with their catch. When you get home, you tell your dad about the day. And what does he do? Well, he cooks up the most delicious meal, but with a catch. Only you get to eat it. Your siblings? Well, if they're so high and mighty with all the fish that they caught, then they can cook and eat it for themselves that night, and tomorrow night, and the night after that. And by the time they're done with everything that they caught, they're at least sick of even thinking about fish. After how they tease you, I count that as a win. Now, if you haven't already, I want you to open your eyes and take a look at this handsome young man right here. This is my dad, and that story is one of many fond memories he has growing up in Venezuela in the 70s and 80s. And that farm, it's gone now, unjustly possessed by the Venezuelan government for the purpose of building up infrastructure without giving any sufficient payment whatsoever. That farm, where all those memories were made, now lies empty with a road running through it like a scar on what could have been. How was this able to happen? Well, to understand what happened in Venezuela, we have to take a quick look back in the past, starting in the early 16th century. Here, the country began as just a simple Spanish settlement with the purpose of agricultural profit through the use of indigenous labor, like many other Latin American countries did. Soon, though, the injustices taking place became clear. Under the monarchy, all the power was being taken from local systems and just given to Spanish-born bureaucrats, with insanely high taxes being put in place. It wasn't just happening in Venezuela, but all across Latin America. In the first step of a pattern we'll begin to see, the wealth and power provided by the country's natural resources was being consolidated to a powerful few, while everyone else was left with little to none. It marked the beginning of the true height of social unrest with the system. In the early 19th century, though, this power began to shift. Napoleon's invasion of Spain severely weakened the empire's grasp over its Latin American colonies, creating a vacuum of power. This coalesced in the movement for independence in the Latin American revolutions. As the conflict escalated, notable military leaders like Simón Bolívar and his own right-hand man, my own ancestor, Antonio José de Sucre, led larger-scale armies for the fight for independence. They knew it was not right that someone could objectify their home, strip it of its natural resources, and give nothing to the people. And so, by the end of the revolutions, over 12 countries were liberated from Spanish control, including Venezuela. It's the second step of our pattern, a driving out of the previous system. A prime example of the saying, to the victor go the spoils. Now that we know some of the country's backstory, let's fast forward to the 1920s, where geologists struck gold, black gold, the largest oil reserve in the entire world, right under Venezuelan soil. The following decades saw the most economically prosperous times out of any country in Latin American history. And under a system of democratic socialism, the profit of Venezuela's oil was being used to build up infrastructure and support its citizens. The oil was in control of the government, but all of the benefits were being redistributed to the people. Once again, though, the pattern repeats. The greed of human nature takes hold, and democratically elected officials begin taking more for themselves. After all, to the victor go the spoils. As wealth is once again consolidated to the powerful few, the middle class erodes, creating a polarizing economic difference between them and the poor common man. An economic crisis ensues, and once again, the people are in unrest. The pattern repeats. Here, military officer Hugo Chavez enters the scene, radically promising an end to corruption, the economic crisis, and a complete reform to the system. He is democratically elected into the presidency, and things do begin well with positive plans underway. But again, the pattern repeats. Chavez is greedy and corrupt. He sets fraudulent elections, fires anyone in his way, and even makes changes to the very constitution so that he can have more years in power. In an ideal world, the system at Venezuela's peak would prevail. A truly democratic system, voted in for the people, by the people, in which the country's natural wealth is shared amongst its citizens. It would have been the most prosperous country in South America and one of the best in the world. What prevented that? The greed and corruption of elected officials who gained too much power without being checked, in a nation that could not learn from its mistakes. After all, selflessness and human nature are not synonymous. To the victor go the spoils. In its present day, Venezuela is just a shell of what it could have been. Mismanagement has led to a decrease in oil production to a fraction of what is possible. And hyperinflation has caused the local currency, the Venezuelan bolivar, to become so volatile and useless that many are resorting to the use of the United States dollar or even just bartering to survive. Chavez's chosen successor, a former bus driver and now absurdly underqualified dictator, Nicolas Maduro, represents the deeply rooted corruption in the government. Millions have emigrated away, a majority vulnerable population of lower class, uneducated, or elderly citizens with absolutely no power to resist the authoritarian regime. In the pattern that brought them down to this point, there was a system of change just to become the very thing that the people worked against. It's a pattern seen not just in Venezuela, not just in Latin America, but in several colonized nations across the globe. It is crucial to understand that democracy is a very fragile thing. It looks good on paper, but the human touch can send it toppling like a house of cards. The United States is an amazing but rare case. It doesn't mean it's invulnerable like many people believe. The pattern seen in so many other colonized nations with the goal of democracy in mind shows that power is all-consuming, all-corrupting. So how can we help these other nations that have fallen victim to this, and how can we prevent it from happening to our own? Well, unfortunately, in my opinion, countries like Venezuela might be too far gone to recover from simply humanitarian aid or the voting in of new officials. Donations won't solve anything, just lessen the struggle. And elections have proven to be anything but genuine. Just take the most recent run for presidency, in which Maduro won again, but polls show that a wide majority of the population voted against him. At this point, the only thing that might bring about change would be revolution. Hoping, though, that the pattern does not repeat. And how about ourselves? How can we learn from these other nations in order to secure our own? Well, we know the pattern, so look for the signs. The consolidation of power is a huge risk. The wealthy should not have more influence over politics than the common man. And a spoil system that places underqualified individuals in positions of power simply for the purpose of being loyalists to those that put them there cannot become the norm, like what took place with Maduro. Under no circumstance should things like changes to our very constitution allow for this consolidation to take place, like what happened with Chavez. By giving too much power to too few people, human nature has the ability to take control with disastrous consequences. To the victor, go the spoils. Hold to your morals, hold leaders accountable, and do not be afraid to exercise your freedom, or you might lose it. Learn from these other nations to ensure that the same pattern that took hold of them does not bring you down too. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Izzy Nerio, and I'm the Director of Hospitality. I hope you've all enjoyed the first half of our event. We're now going to take a 15-minute intermission break. In the lobby, you can enjoy some food and beverages, talk to the speakers, or write notes to them. After our break, we look forward to seeing you back in here for our last 4 talks. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We hope you are inspired by our first 4 talks and are ready to hear from 4 more. My name is Sean Reynolds, and I am the Publicity Director at TEDx St. Francis. Tonight, by attending this event, you are participating and engaging in the final product of our hard work this past year. So we wanted to bring you behind the scenes to highlight all of the people who put in an abundance of time and energy into this experience. Enjoy.
Thank you, publicity team, for that wonderful video. It really attests to what TEDx St. Francis is at its core. Just like the creativity showcased in that video, our next speaker will delve into the world of animation and its endless possibilities. Her talk explores how animation is the catalyst for portraying any and every story, no matter how serious or fantastical. Please join me in welcoming to the stage senior and avid animator herself, Isabella Montesi.
Within this glittery blue binder is not my homework, not my grandma's recipes, and unfortunately not a magical and mystical spell book. It's pretty close though. It's my textbook for my film as literature class this semester. Inside these shimmering edges, you'll find countless explanations of the canonized cinema from the beginning of it to today, all aided by countless images. And despite the hundreds upon hundreds of images within these pages, outside of the animation section, which I might add is 389 pages into the book and a mere 11 pages long, I could find only 7 image examples which came from an animated film. So why is that? Because after all, don't animated films employ many of the same general rules of filmmaking, like compositional elements, shot types, editing rules, scoring, etc., etc.? I could go on. The point is, it's all so very consistent, regardless of whether the film is animated or shot in live action. I've made 2 animated short films and am currently working on my 3rd. So I can tell you that I do in fact use all of those same principles like any other live action filmmaker. The difference is simply the execution. So clearly artistry is not the issue here. Rather, it's recognizing that artistry that is. It's pretty difficult to observe this grand omission of the animated medium without wondering if it's because of the general appeal of many animated films. The accessibility of such narratives often results in animation being given the misnomer of a quote-unquote children genre, even though it is neither inherently targeted towards children or a genre. It's a medium. In the United States, our relationship with animation is one founded on fairy tale adaptations and family-friendly stories, which we can comfortably attribute to the influence of just a handful of major American studios. As a kid, I had some kind of ready-to-wear princess costume for at least 5 different Halloweens. But it's not just the prolific culture of commercialization around American animation that necessarily blurs our understanding of it as an art form. Rather, it's also the lack of emphasis on the artists behind the animation that further muddles our understanding of it as such. For example, American animation directors are rarely highlighted in the marketing for their films, such as trailers, and are almost never discussed in tandem with their live-action counterparts. We recognize art as a human endeavor, which is why AI art generates so much skepticism. So recognizing the people or a person behind a work of art is crucial to our perception of it as art. The lack of emphasis on the artists behind animation and the childhood associations with it foster the conditions for us to simply write off the medium as for kids. And that was certainly the attitude taken at the 2022 Oscars. Despite the dismissal of animation, that year, one of the nominees was the critically acclaimed adult animated documentary, Flea. directed by Jonas Poher Rasmussen. Flee, a European production, tells the harrowing true story of an Afghan boy under the pseudonym Amin, who flees his home country to seek refuge in Europe. Animation probably seems like an odd choice for a documentary, because after all, aren't those about real things with real images? But Flee is different. It's a documentary where its political nature endangers the very people whose stories it shares. So Flee protects its narrator by depicting his journey and interview through an animated representation. And that's the thing. Animation is a tool, one that allows for any and every story to be told regardless of real-life limitations. The very term itself comes from the Latin word animatio, which means the bestowing of life. And that is what animation does. It bestows life on all that it depicts, whether that be sentient toys, storybook ogres, and my personal favorite, the underestimated stick figure. Critically acclaimed indie darling It's Such a Beautiful Day by American filmmaker and animator Don Hertzfeldt is a far cry from the animation many of us are used to. In It's Such a Beautiful Day, all the characters are hand-drawn stick figures, including the main character, Bill. And for the parents out there, despite your kid being able to draw these characters, I wouldn't necessarily rate this movie as PG. In the film, Bill struggles with an undefined terminal illness, and as he deteriorates, so does the animation. It loses its crispness over time and becomes riddled with light leaks. The message of It's Such a Beautiful Day hinges on the appearance of simplicity, as the dichotomy between unassuming stick figures experiencing the most raw manifestations of the human condition only accentuates the emotional impact. Tragically, that did not stop my mom from falling asleep 20 minutes into the movie. But to be fair to her, so much art goes unappreciated because many of us have never had the opportunity or the resources to learn why something matters. Are any of you aware of the social media trend of people going to museums and standing next to art pieces that they think they could have made? Raise your hand if you think you could have made this. Okay, I think some of you didn't raise your hands because you know where I'm going with this. I hate to break it to you, to all of you who raised your hands, but the only way that you could have painted something like this was if you formulated a whole new pigment that has never existed before and turn it into the bluest paint in the world. This painting is a lot more impressive now that we know the process behind it, right? So let me put you onto some filmmaking lingo. When I want to animate, I need to decide the frame rate. Frames are the sequential images that flash by and create the illusion of movement in a video. The more frames per second, or FPS, the smoother the video will appear. The cinematic standard is 24 FPS, and I do not know about you all, but I have homework and track and field practice. If you think that I have the time to make 24 drawings for every single second of animation in my films, I welcome you to come to my house and write my economics paper so that we can make that a reality. Understandably, I cut corners and animate at 12 or even fewer frames per second to save time, which is a common practice in animation. The end result is less smooth, but far more budget-friendly. But what happens when we combine different frame rates into one sequence of animation? Well, if you're working on the medium redefining movie Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, directed by Bob Persichetti, Peter Ramsey, and Rodney Rothman, you might find an innovative storytelling technique in it. In Spider-Verse follows Miles Morales, who is a newcomer to the Spider-Man variant club. He is thus animated at 12 frames per second to demonstrate his ineptitude with his newfound powers. His fellow spider people swing circles around Miles with their well-rounded abilities and are animated at the standard 24 frames per second. It is a subtle difference, but one that really goes to emphasize Miles' amateurish movements in comparison to the rest of them. It is only once Miles accepts the mantle of Spider-Man by the end of the film that he, too, joins the ranks of those animated at 24 frames per second. By taking advantage of a variable frame rate, these filmmakers were able to tell a whole story about an awkward kid finding his footing through just the smoothness of his animation. While not impossible, it is much harder to achieve something like this in the live-action medium. Animation offers far more flexibility and experimentation when it comes to visual styles, as it actively encourages a heightened suspension of disbelief. It's easy to point to foreign and indie productions as markers of the medium's caliber, but Spider-Verse demonstrates how our mainstream animation has never warranted dismissal either. Animation's ability to depict anything is why it is so well suited to telling stories of the imagination and the fantastical and wondrous. If I can think it, draw it, and then draw it a million, billion, cajillion, 32 more times, I could tell whatever story I want. And as we've seen, you don't even need to draw to animate. Animation can be made with practically anything. There is the standard 2D and 3D animation that we've all come to know, but there's also clay animation, sand, paper cutout, oil paint, real people. I've even seen dead cockroaches. The point is, animation lends itself to constant reinvention. In the arts, filmmaking is relatively new to the scene. While we've been making paintings for at least the last 50,000 years, we've only been making films for about 130. Being so young, film is one of the most rapidly evolving art forms today. And I would argue that it is animation which has had the most insane growth spurt over the last few decades. With the rise of the internet, computers in our pockets, and the increasing accessibility of arts education, never before have so many people had the opportunity to enter the field of animation. I myself discovered a passion for drawing because of YouTube and would watch hours and hours and hours of videos of how to draw a person or whatever the heck color theory is, which is the origin story of so many people around the world. Sorry. We're accustomed to thinking about accelerating innovation in the fields of science and technology, but the same is just as true in the fields of art. Just go online, and you can find a plethora of student and foreign and indie productions from across the world with novel visual styles and innovative storytelling techniques from the newest generation of animators, all empowered by the increasing ease of making an animated film. 70 years ago, if I wanted to make 7.5 minutes of 2D hand-drawn animation, this was kind of my only option. This is about 11,000 sheets of paper because we couldn't fit the whole 15,000, which would be 10 minutes. Today, I really only need this, my iPad. To illustrate this point further, just this past week, the winner of the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature went to the Latvian film Flow, directed by Gins Zilbalotis. Flow's win is historic for a multitude of reasons, but namely because it was animated entirely in the free, yeah, I said free, 3D computer modeling software Blender. So just as creation gets easier, so does the ability to discover and engage with art. You don't need to be enrolled in some prestigious Florentine art academy in the 1500s at the age of -3 and study for 25 years under some dude who has a Medici for a sugar daddy to make art anymore. So now, more than ever, please don't look away. At the end of the day, I promise to not break into your house on movie night to peer pressure you into watching the new Wallace and Gromit flick, even if I think you really should. You get to choose the stories you interact with and let shape you. It might be one told to you by a friend, maybe one read in a library, and of course, perhaps one watched in a movie theater. It might also be a story you tell yourself, like, "You're too old for that," or "You're not good enough." One I hear a lot, because I'm known around campus as an artist, is, "I'm not as creative or talented as you." And to be honest, I don't actually believe that's true. To put it in the words of Bob Ross, a man who made painting accessible long before the rise of the internet, I think there's an artist hidden at the bottom of every single one of us. These kinds of stories are pretty hard to realize. They're probably 389 pages into your book. It's pretty hard to find. But it is within those pages that we find a world of endless possibility. It is a world we all deserve if we can permit ourselves to embrace it. So when you leave here tonight, I don't ask you to formulate a whole new color never before known to mankind, but to look for a story, one never before known to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabella, for your insightful speech on recognizing how animation is a legitimate art form. And for sharing your personal journey. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Today, we'll be hearing from someone who has gone through a transformative journey just to understand their own brain. Trust me, this wasn't just a simple trip to the doctor's office. They'll be sharing how a panic attack led to the discovery of ADHD, the challenges that come with misdiagnosis, and how they discover and how they've worked through the entire situation and how they navigate life when their brain doesn't quite work the right way. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Senior Edla Latiranta.
December of my junior year, the night before my pre-calc final. I'm sure most of my classmates were cramming in any last-minute information they were convinced that they needed. On the other hand, I was cozied up in bed, trying to get some beauty sleep. But instead of drifting off into a restful night, I found myself in a whirlwind of anxiety. My brain raced uncontrollably, my body paralyzed beneath the covers. I was running through every minute of that day and every interaction I'd had. As the nausea swept through me, I crawled out of bed and tried to regain control of myself, forced to stay up and become friends with my bathroom floor. Clinging onto the ground, I called my mother, frantic, and begged to go to the emergency room. My body didn't feel like my own, my brain was attacking me from the inside out, and my heart was trying to break
out of my chest. Every breath was shaky, unsure, and my therapist's tactics of box breathing, going in, 2, 3, 4, holding 2, 3, 4, out 2, felt useless when I couldn't form a single thought except for how sick to my stomach I felt. I'd handled panic attacks before, but never like this. Was I a failure? I mean, if it was my own brain causing this, why could I not just stop it? At that moment, even though I wanted nothing more than to just brush this panic attack off, I couldn't. That night, I came face to face with the tip of the iceberg, a symptom of something that had been quietly controlling my life, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. After that night, I set out to understand why my mind and body had betrayed me. I mean, I've always prided myself on my independence. I've known I thrive in structure and that my entire life quite literally revolves around planning everything down to the minute. But even though the action of writing a to-do list brought me peace, the thought of completing it overwhelmed me. Yet those times when I felt truly motivated, so invested in what I was doing, I felt unstoppable, tuning out everything around me and focusing in on just that one thing. A rare occurrence since just starting my math homework made me want to pull my hair out. I'd gotten so good at convincing the people around me that everything was normal that I started to believe it myself. I thought the near terror I felt at the thought of starting a task was just laziness. My inability to focus, just a lack of discipline. I'll do it in a bit became my mantra, but 10 minutes later, I couldn't even remember what I'd agreed to do. I would later learn that masking is a really common behavior for women and girls with ADHD, and it's honestly really easy to be good at it when you're in a structured environment, like school, where accountability is built in. But when left to my own devices, the work would just pile up. ADHD has two primary domains, hyperactive impulsivity and inattention. The media often focuses on the former, portraying disruptive boys who can't sit still. But rarely does it acknowledge the quieter internal struggles of inattentive ADHD. Because 86% of TV shows that feature characters with ADHD show them as disruptive or failing in school, I didn't see myself represented. Freshman year, I reached out to a trusted adult about my concerns with my issues with motivation. But I was just told to use my planner more, so thanks, I guess. But that moment solidified my fears. I didn't fit the stereotypical impulsive ADHD, so my struggles weren't real. It wasn't until that major panic attack my junior year that I would finally reach out for help again. I met with my pediatrician who prescribed me Lexapro, an SSRI or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, to ease my anxiety. But instead of relief, it dulled my emotions and amplified my sense of helplessness. Anxiety, I would later learn, wasn't the root issue. It was a symptom of my undiagnosed ADHD. Misdiagnosis isn't uncommon. ADHD rarely exists in isolation, and comorbidities like anxiety or depression can often mask the real issue. People with ADHD are also more likely to display psychiatric conditions like depression, anxiety, or substance use disorder. But this isn't to say that it's clear-cut. Just because someone has been diagnosed with depression doesn't necessarily mean that they have ADHD, and vice versa, which is why it's so complicated. My pediatrician had prescribed the Lexapro as a placeholder until I could meet with a psychiatrist. But waiting lists stretched for months. It felt like I was sinking deeper into a pit. This wasn't going anywhere. Eventually, I met with a psychiatrist who identified the real issue: inattentive ADHD. Unlike impulsive ADHD, this type is more about internal struggles like procrastination, low motivation, and constant distraction. A survey by the CDC in 2022 highlighted a really interesting disparity. Only 8% of girls aged 3 to 17 are diagnosed with ADHD, compared to 15% of boys. Granted, boys tend to show more external symptoms, which are easier to spot than the internal struggles many girls face. But studies also show that even when the exact same symptoms are present, parents and teachers are less likely to refer girls for further evaluation. At the end of my junior year, I was prescribed Ritalin,
a short-acting stimulant that boosts dopamine and norepinephrine levels, improving focus and attention. For the first time, I could actually concentrate during class, but the effects only lasted a few hours. By afternoon, the Ritalin would wear off, leaving me back where I started, unmotivated and overwhelmed. So we tried long-acting stimulants, which provided the same consistent focus without the emotional crash. But even with the right medications, finding the correct dosage and timing became a roller coaster. ADHD medications don't work the same for everyone. They depend on individual brain chemistry. For me, a combination of Lexapro for anxiety and a long-acting stimulant provided my perfect balance. Looking past my own journey, though, I realized there's something bigger that needs to change: how we view ADHD. I started this journey paralyzed with fear, convinced the panic attacks I couldn't control were some type of failure, something I should have been able to stop. But without that major panic attack my junior year, I don't know when I would have reached out for help, and I could still be blaming myself for struggles I didn't fully understand. ADHD, like so many neurodivergent disorders, isn't linear. It can't fit into some set mold. For me, it was the internal struggles that grew to be constant companions I had to learn to live with. For others, it can look completely different. A diagnosis isn't some label to be feared. It's a tool to foster understanding and provide support, but it still shouldn't be thrown around lightly. Parents, educators, and peers play a critical role in recognizing when someone might need help, and instead of dismissing behaviors as just a phase, we need to create spaces for open conversations. And those with ADHD, I encourage you to reach out and advocate for yourselves. You deserve to find the tools and strategies that work for you. ADHD doesn't look the same for everyone, and its treatment isn't universal either. But with awareness and support, we can help people find clarity and control in their own lives. Because understanding and addressing ADHD isn't just about fixing what's wrong. It's about finding ways to thrive despite the circumstances. Thank you. I still forgot like 2 paragraphs.
Thank you, Edla, for your amazing talk about your journey in managing your ADHD. Today, I would like to introduce 2 amazing speakers who are passionate about expressing their true and unforgiving selves. They've learned that being too much and too little can end up being the same side of the coin. So, without further ado, please give a warm welcome to seniors Devin Panuvelu and Catherine Winton.
I was 7 years old when I was told, "You can't play with us." It was on the playground at school, and there came to me a sharp realization that what I had to give was not always what the world wanted. I was 9 years old when I was told, "No girls allowed." The identity I was so confident in was shattered. Why couldn't I just fit in to what people wanted from me? I was 12 years old when I was told, "You must be dumb because you don't look like us." There was no more playground. I just slowly learned that this was how the world worked.
The playground was home to so many eye-opening realizations for the both of us. For me, it was where I realized I didn't quite fit society's definition of girlhood, and that different wasn't really tolerated. You see, I was chased across the blacktop until I could barely breathe because I chose kickball with the guys over arts and crafts with the girls, because my hair was too curly and my skin too dark. I didn't fit the perfect mold of society's perfect child, and that the playground was where other kids made sure I knew. Katie and I have lived our lives on a seesaw, either trying to find our footing in a world that rejects the magical blending of identities, or being forced into the ground for being too much. Now, we all live in a world full of assumptions. Sometimes these assumptions are fairly harmless. For example, because Katie and I come from Asian families, you might assume we're going to school for computer science or engineering or medicine. The punchline, we're going to school for just that.
However, a lot of these times, these assumptions can also be incredibly damaging. For example, I say I'm half Asian. The usual question, Chinese, Japanese, or Korean. Now, you've given me 3 options to choose from, which, admittedly, is better than just putting me into one of these categories. But the problem is, my answer is still none of the above. My mom comes from Hong Kong, and that is how my family identifies. Within the assumptions we make is a lack of acknowledgement of various dialects, regions, and cultures. Are you from Hong Kong, Taiwan, Macau, Mongolia, Kazakhstan? Doesn't matter. You're Chinese anyways. But I'm not. We're not. I grew up in a world where my multiracial identity simply didn't exist to others. There's those little boxes on the questionnaire that force you to pick your language, your culture, your identity. What happens when you don't have a box? All this comes down to one simple question. What if I'm just not enough? I'm half of one thing and half of another. What if that makes me too little of either? What if, at the end of the day, I'm nothing? Now I'm going to ask you all a seemingly simple question. What do you see when you look at yourself in the mirror? Take a moment to think about that.
For me, when I look in the mirror, I struggle to see my womanhood, especially within my South Asian identity. In fact, it's what pushed me to reject societal gender norms and come out as non-binary. When I look in the mirror, I see a square peg in a round hole. Someone that doesn't quite check the boxes society has defined their perfect Indian woman around. One of these boxes is my curly hair. It was a major point of contention throughout my childhood, and it was pretty obvious I didn't have hair like any of my friends. So my solution? 5 hours in the salon chair every 6 months, using relaxers to turn these curls into pin-straight strands. I'm never doing that one again. And this wasn't the only box. My dark skin, my broad shoulders, my hyperpigmentation. The mirror sent a clear message. I was too much. Katie, what do you see in the mirror?
Bear with me when I say this. I'm going to sound a little bit crazy, but don't I always? But frankly, I see nothing. I've looked at myself in the mirror countless times. We all have. My entire life, I've been told that I look like my mom, my dad, my brother. The person I see reflected back at me doesn't, though. Some classmates have told me, "You look white." I look in the mirror, I can't see it. Others have told me, "You look Asian." I look in the mirror, and I definitely can't see that. And my friends tell me that they can 100% tell that I'm Asian. But honestly, I really, really cannot see that. I've spent so long trying so hard to see in the mirror what the world sees in me that I've lost myself. I look now, and I see no one. I'm nothing. I'm too little.
So where does this sense of identity, or lack thereof, come from? What are we introduced to at such a young age that shapes how we see the world and ourselves? The answer?
Media. I'd like to get your thoughts on representation in media. What % of some of the top Netflix actors and directors of 2024 do you think were mixed? Raise your hands. 15%? 12%? 10%? Close. A meager 5.4% of these stars were mixed, compared to the 12.5% of Americans who identify as multiracial.
Now, I'd like to direct you to the smaller number on the screen. If you can't see it, here it is. 1.7 of all the actors and directors in the past year's biggest movies and TV shows were queer. That's it. None of them were trans. Media was our gateway to liberation from the mirror. I'd seen a couple of queer people of color on TV shows and movies, but I'd yet to see a South Indian, non-binary, queer character that I could perfectly relate to. Yes, I know it's crazy to expect that every intersectionality of every single identity be perfectly represented in media, but I still felt like a fish out of water, so my search continued. That's when I took AP English Language in my junior year. Our final was an independent research essay on a book of our choice. So after a little bit of digging, I settled on one I thought I'd enjoy. The book I chose, Zami, A New Spelling of My Name by Audre Lorde. Zami was less about representation for me. The main character identifies as a Black, lesbian, woman, poet. I don't identify with any of those terms. In fact, what I did connect with was Audre Lorde's journey to find a community that embraced her for all of her. And there it was. This was the very journey I was on, looking for a community that didn't embrace me for just my South Indian identity, just my queerness, just my trans identity, but for me. Audre Lorde is on a similar journey, looking for community where as a Black lesbian, she didn't have to singularly exist as Black or gay, but as just Audre Lorde. I'd like to share a quote that snapped me out of this perfect quest for a perfect community. Once I accepted my position as different from the larger society, or any single sub-society, Black or gay, I felt I didn't have to try so hard. To be accepted, to be femme, to be straight, to look straight, to be nice, to look proper, to be liked, to be loved, to be approved. What I didn't realize was how much harder I had to try, merely to stay alive, rather to stay human. How much stronger a person I became in that trying. I cried when I finished Sami. There wasn't anything particularly heartbreaking about the book, but I sobbed when I neared the end. It was so freeing, so liberating to realize I was no longer lost, no longer stuck in the woods trying to find a place to call home. Zami showed me I was home.
Just like Devin, I've always searched for a piece of me in the stories I read. There's a sense of familiarity that accompanies seeing someone like you in the world. I can name very few pop culture figures who, like me, identify as Asian. But even then, my so-called representation usually ended up forcing themselves into one of their many little boxes. Through Zami, Devin found an idea that felt like home to them. Over the past 5 years, I've read over 45,000 pages of books, and I've watched an obscene number of minutes of television. Still, I didn't find the sense of home. Seeing this lack of myself on the screen, I decided to look more into the issue, find representation in more niche areas, and write about it. When I joined the St. Francis newspaper, The Lancer, I was able to focus my efforts on the entertainment industry. One of my favorite articles that I've ever written was one on Michelle Yeoh winning her Golden Globe for Everything Everywhere All at Once. When I listened to her interviews, the one thing that stuck out to me the most was her voice. She has a Cantonese accent that is so deeply familiar to me that it gave me that sense of kinship and belonging. She talked about not fitting in, not seeing people like her when she moved to Hollywood, and not seeing representation for her full identity, an aging Malaysian Cantonese woman, on the screen. I understood her words.
So just like the intersectionality of identities in Zami was a calling card to me, the struggle of not being represented was a calling card to Katie. You see, we consume media like our lives depend on it. And whether it be in books, interviews, TV shows, we find people from completely different stories that yet speak to us. What does it mean to be too much? To be trans, Indian, dark-skinned, curly-haired, queer, and non-binary, all at once?
What does it mean to be the girl on the playground who doesn't quite fit into one group, but also doesn't quite fit into the other? Michelle Yeoh taught me something while I was writing that article. You might not be on that screen, but in a way, you are. The world is filled with people who don't know who they are, and media certainly doesn't help with that. But by recognizing that there are so many people who don't fit into the little boxes on the questionnaire, who are stuck on the ground on the seesaw, or struggling in the air, maybe that's how we find ourselves. By accepting that not knowing your identity may, in and of itself, be an identity. I'd like to end with a quote I found while reading my favorite book. You are American, Japanese, Korean, and by being all of those things, you are not truly any of those things. You consider yourself a citizen of the world. Devin found freedom in the realization that you can be everything, everywhere, all at once. Meanwhile, I found home in the knowledge that I can be nothing and that can still be enough.
So let's go back to that seesaw. We've all grown up on it. And hey, for some people, it might just be the perfect fit. But for some of us, like Katie and I, it's not. And that's where media comes in. Yes, media is just as guilty of trapping you in that little sect of the playground. But whether it's reading a book or joining newspaper, it can pull you right off. And that's when everything clicks. You look around and you see the whole playground, the slides, the jungle gym, the monkey bars. You realize there's more to the world and yourself than that little seesaw.
There has to come a day when you look in the mirror and stop trying to see what the world sees in you. You have to be able to look at yourself and realize that this is what you've been given, this is who you are, and that is enough.
And you're not just going to realize this one day. It's going to take time and effort and learning to love yourself again, like you did before you entered that playground.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine and Devin, for your heartfelt talk. I'd now like to introduce our last speaker of the night. She will be discussing her journey of learning to listen intently to others and coming to understand that everyone has a story to share. Please welcome to the stage communication specialist and my friend, Avery Simonson.
An Energizer bunny, a whirlwind, a chatterbox. Since I learned to talk, I basically never stopped. I'm an extrovert who loves talking and people. As a toddler, I'd wake up yapping throughout the house from early in the morning, usually waking my 2 older sisters and starting each day off with a bang. Car rides were all about me, my stories, and my singing. It was the perfect situation because everyone was trapped in their car seats and had to listen. In fact, I was such a loud talker, my parents had to take me to get my hearing checked. Growing up, my sisters were, and still are, my best friends. They let me be the lead singer in our Hannah Montana karaoke shows. We put on lots of plays and dance parties, and I made sure to always be the spotlight. But for any of you with sisters, you know, they're always going to tell you how it really is. And usually, it's not even communicated with words. We perfected a language of side eyes, looks, winks, and eye rolls. If my outfit just wasn't it, one look from them would make me change. A specific night that changed my mindset was over the summer before starting high school, and we were all sitting at family dinner. My oldest sister, Riley, was about to leave for college, and this was one of the last nights that we'd spent as a complete family. While Riley was talking, I was thinking about my stories to add and funny things to share. Eager to talk, I interrupted her with my awesome story. And instead of getting the sister's look of disapproval, she came at me with, "Not everything is about you, Avery." That night, each of my family members came to me and made sure I was very aware that I had ruined the family dinner. They told me I had to listen, read the room, and realize that it's not always about me. I was bummed. I'd ruined the night before my sister had left for college. Knowing that I wouldn't see her for a few months, I thought I'd never forgive myself for that. I realized that I rarely listened. When people spoke, I was thinking in my head about what I wanted to say. So why was I not a good listener? Was that just being the youngest? Was I just self-absorbed or worried about having the best story? I was desperate to find an answer. As a dual citizen of Denmark, I love the time I'm able to spend there over the summers with my extended family, especially my grandparents and young cousins. One time while visiting, I was chatting with my fafa, which is Danish for grandpa, and he told me about an interesting nonprofit that started in Denmark called the Human Library. you have the opportunity to meet with someone completely different from you and hear about their experience. These people are called human books, and us listeners get to read them. I can immerse myself in their story, although I can't physically relate to them. And although I can't put myself in their shoes, being able to empathize with them opened my heart to their unique differences. Having these one-on-one conversations helped me to see life from their perspective. And when their specific book was chosen, they felt more comfortable knowing that someone wanted to hear their story. In Copenhagen, the event is set up in a reading garden. It's a peaceful place to visit and check out a human book. Human books range in topic, but usually it's someone who's faced judgment or stigma. Most of the time, there's someone completely different from you. As I returned home, I thought this would be a good organization to volunteer with because it had Danish roots, and it was the concept I was looking for. I knew the Human Library was in 85 countries, and after further involvement, I found a Bay Area manager that I wanted to meet with, that I wanted to reach out to. She suggests that I train to be a librarian and train our human books at our Bay Area events. This required training to help visitors with stigmas, tough situations with differing opinions, and visitors who freeze up and don't know what to ask the human books. I even had to understand how to help visitors who needed to be active listeners. Yes, that's right. I had to teach people how to listen, which was ironic because that's what I struggled with the most. After this training, I realized that the Human Library could play a part in bettering myself and my listening habits. The Human Library in the Bay Area is comprised of more than 20 human books, including, but not limited to, a narcissist, a girl in a wheelchair, an atheist, someone with chronic pain, a survivor of HIV, a survivor of abuse, a self-acclaimed psychic, a former cult member, and a blind person. We put on events in libraries, community centers, and even recently did a corporate training event for eBay employees at their headquarters. The goal of the Human Library is to break down stigma and, as they say, unjudge someone. Hearing their stories helps to humanize their differences and fully unjudge someone. In these 30-minute conversations, readers are encouraged to ask whatever they want to know. For example, one of our human books is a girl in a wheelchair who is also unable to speak. She uses a device to communicate, and it was one of the most interesting conversations I had because she opened up to me about her everyday struggle with communication. And I got to ask what I truly wanted to know without feeling like I was asking something offensive or invasive. The conversation felt very authentic. I later went on to learn that she'd written a book, and she's one of the most interesting people that I've ever met. Each reading is confidential. Nothing is off limits to ask. I've sat and read many of these books myself. None of them are like me. They're all adults and have had experiences completely different from mine. Because of this, I don't think there could be better training to become an active listener. You realize that 30 minutes is enough time for you to get uncomfortable. You really have to dig deep in order to absorb the full story that they're wanting to share. At some point, you break through and feel more relaxed to ask whatever you want to know and learn about their experience and even about yourself. A tool I've used to help self-reflect is to limit distractions in my life, like technology, especially during these super meaningful conversations. Through my involvement over the last year, the biggest thing the Human Library has taught me about listening is to create a culture of encounter. Challenge yourself to get out of your bubble and form connections with people completely different from you. I witnessed readers and books alike in our library walking away in tears, astonished by how they'd been enlightened and what they'd gained. Although none of us are alike, we created a community that I value so much, a community valued in the mission to unjudge someone. Now, I look at every conversation as an opportunity to stay engaged, be understood, and be inspired. Reading these human books opened my heart to listening, which is the loudest form of kindness. Reading these books gave me a better read of myself. So, what else did I learn about listening? First, don't be distracted. Be all in. At the Human Library, you don't have your phone out during the conversations. They're too deep and too interesting. It made me realize how rare it was to talk with friends and family without having a phone in my hand. When there's pauses in conversation, it's such a crutch to pull out your phone. Let the silence be there. Second, I learned not to one-up or take away from someone's personal experience. Too often we try to relate to others by giving our, oh, I can relate, but really that just takes away the focus off of the other person. Third, ask open-ended questions so the person can really describe their experience. Ask them how they felt or what they would do differently. After all my experiences with the Human Library, I've seen myself change as a sister, a friend, a daughter, and an overall person. I've seen myself empathize better with people because it helped me realize that you never know what someone's going through if you can't physically see it. I also learned to stand up to hateful comments, even in awkward situations like calling out a friend at the lunch table. We have to keep each other accountable, and speaking up is the first step. Above all, I learned to be a much better listener. Now, when my sisters visit home from college, I truly cherish the time and the conversations that we exchange. They tell me all about their college experience, and I get to actually retain the knowledge, unlike before. And I'm so grateful for that. Above all, just remember, there's a reason we were born with 2 ears and 1 mouth. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, Avery. I hope all of us took this opportunity to listen with the same intent, respect, and kindness that Avery's talk calls us to. And thank you all for being here tonight. As much and as great as all of our speakers are, it's your presence that really makes this event matter, and the conversations that you take out of this room today that are the most impactful part of our event. So whether you leave here eager to write a college application, or want to go back and rewatch your favorite childhood animated film with a newfound perspective, we hope this night proved insightful and that you take something away that you didn't come in with.
The program has come to an end, but we would like to take this time to thank everyone who has made this event happen starting last May. So first, please welcome back to the stage our operations teams. And now, our speaker and speaker mentor pairings. And we're your directors. We would like to give a special thanks to Mr. Thompson, our amazing tech team, and our photographers tonight. And last, but certainly not least, we would like to thank our incredible moderator, Mrs. Leslie Shortle, and invite her back to the stage.
Tonight, you got an insight into what the future of leadership in our world looks like. Tonight is simply the start of an everlasting conversation.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and have a wonderful night. We'll see you next year.